Thank you very much. I'll just wait for the presentation. You see the picture is a symbolic one. You see the round stairs and you follow your revision. And Andrea is circle, right? So we run around in circle is actually what happens in politics most of the times. And especially in the relationship between the Macedonian community and the Albanian community. So this was really a more of a symbolic picture that I put it. Can you go for the next slide? I would like to do a little bit of chronological analysis of the legal documents and their establishment in terms of the use of the languages or linguistic rights, so the legal framework from the past until what is the current situation and how it is established, as well as to comment a little bit about the implementation process and to give maybe a food for thought on what could be a possibility for NTA specifically for some of the ethnic communities in North Macedonia. Okay. Macedonia was a specific federal unit since 44 until 91. And it was a Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia unit, while in 91 it gained its independence, of course, as an independent state. In the meeting of ASNOM, which is Anti-Fascist Assembly for the National Liberation of Macedonia, in 44, when the foundations of the statehood actually happened and Macedonia were placed, the Macedonian language was placed as the official language of the Macedonian country, and it was settled that the official language of the Macedonian state is the Macedonian people's language. After this, in 45, with the proposition from the Commission of the Languages in the Federal Macedonia, it was decided to accept the Macedonian alphabet. And in 45 also it was adopted the alphabet as of the Macedonian language. Here it started the language policies in the country, specifically with this framework and of the state of Macedonia. Although in the legislative formulation in the manifesto of the ASNOM and in the statement for the basic rights of the citizens, all citizens were in equal position, and there were any creation of hierarchy in terms of Macedonian and any other languages. But in relation to the language, there is a concrete and precise manner of deciding that the Macedonian is an official language and the only code of communication, or the language of the countries with which the country communicates. Is the Macedonian language. There is no mentioning, for example, of the Albanian or other languages. And here, in that precise moment, according to the Albanian scholars and the Albanian community in the country, here it continues to create problems even nowadays, posing the Macedonian language as the main state language. In the Constitution of the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia in 46, where the Macedonia was recognized as an equal unit of the federation, of course, the Macedonians were accepted as a nation, and it was also accepted that there is the Macedonian language as an official languages within this federation, on the basis of the model state-nation language. So there is the state, the Macedonian, and then there is the Macedonian language, and then there is the Macedonian nation. In 63, I will come back to that. Could you go? Yeah, and then we'll come back to the census. In 63, the Social Federal Republic of Yugoslavia issued new constitution, and it reaffirms the same thing, that the Macedonia is an equal unit, and that all the federal laws and other laws within the federation are issued in the official languages of the federation. One of those is the Macedonian language. In the work, for example, of the state bodies as well, in the bodies of the social self-government, there is the Macedonian language affirmed. 74 constitutions kept this monoethnic Macedonian state, and it reaffirms again that Macedonian is the official language, without even mentioning, for example, the other the other nationalities, but they were mentioned as nationalities, such as the Albanians and the Turks, terms that was perceived quite not positive by the communities, and they were perceived as a term which actually defines a community with a lower status than nation, and this posed a perception, of course, problems for those community. But it was stated that to everyone is guaranteed the right in front of judicial proceedings, in the state bodies, in the organization, communities to actually have the use of their own language, their mother language, and translation. There was some changes in the Constitution in 81 and 86, of course, but the regulation of the languages stayed the same. In Socialist Republic of Macedonia, the official language is the Macedonian language and the Cyrillic alphabet. The members of the nationalities, yes, thank you. Could you go even further? It is a little bit difficult giving you, yeah, just go further. Go? Okay. No.
This one?
No, before. Okay. It was stated that the members of the nationalities have the right to use their language and alphabet freely, and they can develop their culture and establish organizations. And there it is, 91, the independence of the state. There was a referendum. As a new pluralistic constitution was adopted, but there were some Albanian political parties that did not vote for Democratic Prosperity and Democratic People Party. Nevertheless, the official language of the Republic Macedonian and the Cyrillic alphabet, but in the units of local self-governing, in which as a majority are the members of the nationalities, the official use besides the Macedonian language and the Cyrillic alphabet are the languages and the alphabet of the nationalities as it is determined by law. And this is the beginning where we have side by side, let's say, a regulation of the language policies in the country. There was a request since 91 from the Albanian community, a request for ethnical and language equality, and this faced pretty much a big resistance from the state, and it culminated with the conflict of 2001 and the Ohrid Framework Agreement signed in 13 August 2001. Could you go ahead with the slides, please? Thank you. This implicated also constitutional changes in the spirit of this multi-ethnic country. What does it mean? In the entire territory of Republic of Macedonia and its international relations, the official language is the Macedonian and the Cyrillic alphabet, but other language spoken by at least 20% of the population is also an official language as defined by this article. And later this article was also transposed into a law which regulated the use of languages of those that are at least 20% of the population. This, as an official language, how the terminology was actually put there, posed many challenges in terms of interpretation. The Albanian ethnic community, of course, was not satisfied because there is no Albanian. It is not written as such that it's the Albanian ethnic community, but it was known by the censuses that is for at least 20%. And they always look at it as a language that is side by side by the Macedonian, or some even Albanian scholars call them translated language. Even though it is written that it is one other official language is the Albanian language, but they always seen it as a side-by-side, as a translated language which can be used, but it has to be regulated further and determined by law. Also, the Ohrid Framework Agreement imposed also the territorial principle, which means in these units of the local self-government where there are at least 20% of the population speaking this language, then it can be an official language. We come to the, can you go last? Of course, there is the law of the use of Macedonian language, and where it is the only code of communication in the country and abroad, so in international relations, the Macedonian language is the official language. We come to the point of very discutable and very conflictual situation, and that is the 2018 law on the use of languages. which posed a very significant political debate in the country, a lot of constraints, a lot of challenges. It was a pretty much difficult time between the Macedonian political parties and the Albanian political parties to actually negotiate on the position again of the, so we are circling around, this is what I said, as a circle again for the position of the, but the one thing that this change brought is a further detailed status of the language, where it will be implemented. Could you go even further? Yes. Even some of the Albanian scholars that did actually commented on the previous, after the Ohrid Agreement and the law of the use of languages for at least 20% of the population, which was abolished with the law of the implementation of languages, they still think that it's a translated language, and it's a side-by-side, and they still think that it is projected, like it was projected within ASNOM, that is projected now, that the priority is given to the Macedonian language, and this poses a very conflictual problems with their discussions. But it is stated for the first time, in the, legally speaking, that in the first article of this law, that we talk about the Albanian language. So between brackets it is written the Albanian language, whereas in the rest of the text is not mentioned because it's very well known. Even before that it was not mentioned, but it was known that we talk about the Albanian language. Yes, this is the law on the use of the languages, which was not signed by the president at that time. So there were very much political issues on that, and it was just signed by the president of the parliament and then issued in the official gazette as without a signature. It went through veto, of course, and qualified majority voting in the parliament. This is how it was regulated, of course, and could you go further, please? So it is on the whole territory in international relations, Macedonian and Cyrillic alphabet, but another language, you see the Albanian language here, official. So all the state executive, legislative, and judicial branches, all the units within these branches, in the units of local self-government where it's at least 20%. Could you go further? Then we have regulations about how the court should apply, and people can choose to use whatever language they feel like, Macedonian or Albanian language. Then it's tackled on the sessions of the government, each session, on the sessions of the parliament, where those that are chairing the sessions, if they speak the Albanian language, then the whole session will be in Albanian language, and then the Macedonian will be actually the translated language. So we go around in that. Other institutions also, such as where there are employees and there are chairs of sessions and boards that speak the Albanian language. One thing that this law has made an impact on the everyday life, let's say, and a misinterpretation, is that it gave only this, let's say, right and protection of the Albanian language in those bodies, state bodies that are performing public services. So it is stated, of course, not private entities. But the implementation, it often happens that private associations of economic sectors, etc., if they have within the board somebody that is speaking Albanian language, they force for the sessions and for the communications and for the publications to be in Albanian language. So this is in the last, let's say, years after the implementation. It's a very new law. If we can comment, it happens as such. I'm taking a lot of time, but I will go, and not to forget the smaller communities, right? Those that are below, could you change? Below, yeah. Yes, below. Go, sorry. Below, I will comment on this later. Below, go, please. Go. Okay. This law, not to forget that this law also made two distinguished institutions, the Agency for the Implementation of the Language and the Inspectorate, because the agency is actually responsible for all the implementation, and the Inspectorate is responsible to issue fines of all the public institutions that are not in accordance with the law. If you see the reports of the inspectorate, you will see that no institution has given a fine yet. And they have an annual plan where they list the institutions year by year who they have to visit. At the beginning, because of maybe political pressure, they were limited to few institutions that were already known that they are implementing immediately the law. But now they are starting from, to enlarge that list years to come. The agency is giving an institutional major support. So the agency is actually a hub for translators and for lectors in the Albanian language. It is an agency for implementation of the language, of the Albanian language as such. So it does trainings on a regular basis, like 4 times a year, trainings for translators and trainings for lectors, because this law means that there should be a lot of translating going on in the whole country, and there was a lack, and of course of that nobody was prepared. So this is the agency primary job to ensure that that this is done. When I go for the law on the rights of the communities who are less than 20%, there were 2 laws that were important, 2008 and 2020. Did you go further? Go. Yes, 2008 and 2020. There is a very significant gap in terms of time, right? There are several years, 12 years distinction between these laws. It was very criticized, 2008 law, because it really did not give any details about the protection of the language especially, but also culture of the smaller ethnic communities, and from the census, which you probably saw.
Turkish, yes.
Yeah, Turkish, Vlach, Bosniak, Serbs, and Roma, of course, these are the ones that are less than 20%. There was an establishment in 2008, an agency for implementation of this law and exercises the rights of communities, protecting them, but there were no budgets there defined, so there was a lack of capacities for doing anything that could support these ethnic communities, and it's a 12 period of time, so you can see how this field of the language regulation in Macedonia was really pretty much neglected, and the focus was shifted to the implementation of the Ohrid Framework Agreement in terms of the proportional representations in employment and etc. about the Albanian community. This has changed in 2020. So there is a new law, and the agency was restructured. There is a significant budget now for the agency. There is a clear structure and competences of the agency for this, and the competences are very clear and very straightened. There are several mechanisms that they use for, let's say, promoting, not that much protecting, because this is the part, somebody said in the previous sessions that it's very much different whether you promote or you protect. But this agency is mainly focused on promotion, and they have a sort of a, could you go further? They have a sort of a participatory forum in the Article 23, which actually is a forum where representatives of the organizations and associations established in North Macedonia, and they are actually having this clear goal of promotion and protection of these smaller ethnic communities. They are as members of this participatory forum, but also members of the state organs, state institutions such as the Ministry of Education and Science, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Local Self-Government, and etc. There is also financial means of special fund instruments for this association, and it's given on a yearly basis. So in terms of implementation, even though the law is very recent and it was in the middle of COVID, there are some results that happened, and there are many organizations that actually use this fund for many cultural events and cultural activities only. On the use of languages side, we cannot say that, but on the cultural events, this is an ongoing process. Can you go further? Yeah. There is yet to be seen more about the implementation, but you can see that this law on the implementation of languages, yes, it was 2018, but The implementation started in 2019. This is where, from this date, the agency is also established, and they mostly focus on publishing guidelines, publishing translated documents, etc. So they, with the money they have, they do this work up until now. And the implementation of the law of those that are less than 20% is also going in a good direction from what I have analyzed and what I have talked with the people, both with the Language Implementation Agency Inspectorate and this Agency for Ethnic Relations, which is in the same building and within the Ministry of Political Systems. As yet to be seen the implementation process. What I want to discuss is further, and that is whether there is a possibility of NTA arrangements in this sense. I mean, for the Albanian ethnic community, it's strictly territorial. It was strictly territorial. There was no even maybe an interest among the ethnic political parties, Albanian political parties, or it is the constitutional democracy. It is the sharing, power sharing mechanism. So there was no space really to regulate NTA as such, because it's already given the language status on a more higher level in terms, I'm talking about NTA in the language use sphere. But my question is also on whether we should give more time for the implementation of 2020 law in order to see whether this really adapts the needs and really what the smaller ethnic communities needs in terms of what is regulated in this law, or they need something more. Of course, when we will see how much they use this mechanism that are established, we can see whether there are some other interests. Of course, it's not foreseen in NTA, and but it gives additional support and framework. How much time do I have? Sorry.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, perfect. Next slide, please. What I suggest, it's an analytical, maybe a short analytical, just scratching the surface analysis, whether, and focusing more on those ethnic communities that are less 20%, whether to transform this association, which according to the law, they need to perform a specific field. They need to be registered in the central registry as associations for promotion and protection of the ethnic communities, whether we could really transform them into representatives, but legal representatives, right, such as what NTA is recognizing of the communities, not just performing promotion in a way of the cultural rights of these communities and allocating funds. The strength will be, yes, legal and full representation, because already the Albanian ethnic community is somehow inserted in the system, but there is always a neglected status of the smaller ethnic communities. The weakness is, it is a very difficult process to convince the other big political parties about this, because there was never a voice for hearing what the smaller ethnic communities really want to say, because there was always the dichotomy between the Macedonian and the Albanian. The threats, yes, if you give something to the smaller ethnic communities, then perhaps the Albanian community will ask for something else. Maybe a language recognized even on an international level, because now it's not an international level, it's only the Macedonian and Cyrillic alphabet. So maybe that could open some really Pandorian box and doors for some other issues, that this could be a threat. And of course the opportunities for especially political parties of the smaller ethnic communities, they could finally wake up. They were sleeping for so long. They were just riding the train of the bigger political parties in coalition building, so they were really not much motivated and eager to implement their platform and what is the protection of the rights of the smaller ethnic communities. Just a final thought, what the law on the implementation of the languages perceives, apart from the regulation of the use of languages in different spheres, legislative, judicial, and executive branch and other state institutions, is also symbols. And this is very much criticized by the legal scholars in the country and abroad, that this article about the symbols of banknotes, for example, the monetary, where there is a specific, the money that you have to have the symbols of all the ethnic communities, especially of the community that has at least 20%. is an article that doesn't belong to the law of the implementation of the languages because it touches upon the cultural aspect and the symbol side. So that is pretty much criticized the legal scholars, and they called it, I don't know in English, natrapnik, I don't know if... Intruder, yeah, an intruder, and a legal regulation, thank you, an intruder to this regulation, and this is something yet to be seen, how it will be. Even though, as a multi-ethnic country, since the beginning, there is a common heritage of all that is represented somehow in the everyday life and in the banknotes, but this will be a significant touch upon the cultural identity of the communities living in the country. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the long...
Thank you, Marina, for explaining and giving us this update on the Macedonian case. I would open the door for questions. Tomasz and then Konstantinos.
Yes, I would like to thank you in a double way. Not only the first, that was very interesting, and the second was my private interest because I visit your countries.
Yeah.
Some knowledge, but I want to ask, does this law that you mentioned refer to the whole territory? Or because I know that Macedonia is divided into 80 and 84?
81.
81.
80 plus 1.
And did you consider different options in different communes, like in Poland, that there is the law that refers, for example, we have Kashubian minority, and it's only in some communes, so there is a different law that in another part of Poland we have the Lithuanian minority. So particular law refers to particular regions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Konstantinos, maybe you can also ask and then she will respond.
Thanks for the presentation. I would like to know, you mentioned I think only once the Ohrid Agreement. To my eyes, Ohrid Agreement is a very important landmark. I mean, has the Ohrid Agreement direct connection as a trigger to the production for the establishment of the new law on minorities? And the second is that actually this question is NTA or TA, the arrangement of 20%. And the question is, first of all, to know the implementation of special language rights, namely education, most of all, applies to specific counties or wherever Albanians exist. If they move, let's say, in the next 20 years, for some reasons, from A to B region, so they will take with them the right to establish their own schools.
Okay.
So this NTA, but through territoriality, right? Because it's very interesting, I think, from a theoretical point of view, how we define NTA or NTA. Because in the end, you were very sharp saying this is not NTA for the Albanian language, for the Albanians. Is that the case?
Okay, Tomasz. Now it is on the whole territory, and we talk about state institutions. That is a central government, right? So all the central government institutions. Macedonia is unitary and it's decentralized in 80 plus 1, which one is the city of Skopje, which having 10 municipalities within. The previous regulation of the law stated that in the municipalities that have a population residing at least 20%.
Yes, exactly.
But with the less of the 20%, the law gave a choice of the municipalities' government, of the self-government units, to introduce the language or not to introduce language. So there was an option. In those that have at least, it was mandatory. This remained the same with the language of the use of the law of the use of languages, but it gave a whole other dimension of the whole territory, and it gave a further use of the language in the country. So more deeper regulation in terms of
Do you think minorities are happy with this regulation?
Which minority?
That refers to the whole country, and it's difficult to differentiate situation when, for example, the minority becomes the majority, and should have some privileges, like in Poland, that we have the situation that in one commune, Lithuanians are the majority, so they have special rights, but only in that specific commune, because then they are the majority.
Of course, the Albanian community is very satisfied about this regulation because they have a full implementation of their mother tongue and language and use in education and in all the spheres in life. They are happy. If you ask about the smaller ethnic groups, of course, they will say no, that they are not happy. And this is the threshold that was even from the Ohrid Framework Agreement established as a threshold of 20%. And Konstantinos, yes, the 20% is a milestone. The Ohrid Framework Agreement is the foundation, is from where this threshold started. But it introduced a territorial principle. This is why I was commenting that NTA, territorial principle and a threshold. So if, let's say, 10,000 Albanians move from Skopje to Veles, let's say, or Kefkelia near the Greek border, their percentage in the population will rise up and will go under the legal obligation that if they are at least 20%, they can use it.
Okay.
From a local self-government point of view. But on a state level, wherever they go now, as it's regulated, they can use the language. So if they're employed in the state administration, the sessions of the parliament, and everywhere, the commissions, the sessions, everywhere is now 2 languages. If you go there and if you participate in the sessions, you will always have to be prepared. I mean, I was a couple of times and I was always with the headphones, even though I'm, I don't understand Albanian, my mother tongue is Macedonian, but now it's like mandatory conferences that are organized, everything is in double language. So that particular comments of the scholars that the Albanian language is translated, now it's vice versa. That you see a situation that the Macedonian now language is, in some cases, I mean the everyday practice, of course, not from a linguistic point of view, I'm not an expert in linguistics, but it can be said that now the Macedonian language on a state level is translated language.
Why?
I hope I answered the question, but this is why I said that I don't see space for NTA, as I see how it all happened and the analysis, I don't see space for NTA for the Albanian. You see NTA?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a very tricky situation, but I get the line of thought of Konstantinos and what he wants to argue.
Yeah.
Interesting thought.
Yeah.
Because basically, if you allow...
Yeah, sure, I mean... this is why we are here.
The most recent law is basically implementing an NTA principle, suggesting that if you're Albanian, wherever you go, you can practice your language rights. In that sense, it is non-territorial.
Yes, if you look at it in that sense.
We even had a particular, let's say, political moment when one of the ministers in the government went to a municipality which is predominantly populated by ethnic Macedonians, suggesting that he should communicate with the local institutions there in the Albanian.
Yeah, because he represents states authorities.
Yeah. So now that suggests that it's not the principle of the Ohrid Framework Agreement which said only in municipalities where it's above 20 you can practice it. Now you can practice it everywhere as a citizen, because it becomes your individual right to practice your language wherever you go on the entire territory.
Yeah, but if you look at it, that way, the Framework Convention says every citizen can use, there is the right to approach the public authorities in your mother tongue, and it should be translated. If you look at it like that. Plus, NTA has this representation mechanism, association where it represents you. Yeah. This is something that.
The rights do not correspond to obligations from the state part.
Yeah.
This is another.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions in this case? We need to move on.
I have a practical question. If there are 2 official languages, and I understand properly, yes, 2 official languages, does it mean that we can expect the information about names of the cities in two languages?
Yes. Airport, train station on a state level, which is not under state level, so state-owned, double language.
Everywhere? Everywhere.
Where is the state represented, which is on a central level? The decentralization counts a lot here. You won't find it in municipalities where they're less than 20%.
Okay.
Sorry, it doesn't mean that if you communicate with state level authorities in local areas, then this 20% threshold doesn't count, but if you go to municipality, then threshold, it doesn't mean that actually 20% threshold is only for communication with local municipalities. If
Yes.
you go to Veles and you go to municipality, use Macedonian, but if you go to, I don't know, some text office, which is state authority, no matter whether it's 20%, it doesn't count, you can communicate.
Yeah, the thing is that they are obliged to know both languages. This is the obligation posed on state institution to know both languages.
On state institutions.
On
but
state level.
Municipal, not.
Yeah.
No, to be practical, it's both actually. If
But
you
what is
allow
the
me,
purpose of 20%
if you
threshold?
take Veles,
Okay.
Yeah, you took Veles. Yeah.
1% of Albanians
Yeah.
in the Veles municipality. Okay, so if they address a local institution, it should be in the Macedonian language. But whichever institution is a state institution, like the Minister of Finance, for instance, with a local office in Veles, that office has to respond to them in the Albanian as well.
But if they ask in Albanian.
If they ask, of course.
Yeah.
They don't have to, I mean, if you're asking Albanian, of course, they should
Maybe I
respond.
can just add here, from the practical reason, when you have on the state level, so they have symbolic meaning. But usually in the normal communication, people can use one language or another. So it's not very problematic, or there is no, although the obligation exists, they can ask, they don't need to do that. But the problem is that on the educational level, young Albanians or the other, they don't know Macedonian. So in time, that will become, I believe, it become a practice because they don't know. They are educated, but very small number of classes. And the Albanians that are 18 years old, they hardly, they speak on English, on a ski centers or in a restaurant.
I have students I speak with in English because we don't. That opens another door of saying whether it was really Ohrid framework agreement towards multi-ethnic country, or. But I'm not, going down there. Sorry. Yeah.
It could go on
Forever. Yeah.
details as well, but I think we need to thank.
Thank you so much for the discussion. Thank you.